Welcome to another episode of Group Therapy, where each week a group of our regulars from the Underground Bunker, we get together and we talk about the news of the week and we just have fun. And the whole gang's here today. We got Lynette Observer Wagoner from the wilds of Ohio. How are you, Lynette?
Pretty good. I almost didn't make it because yesterday I choked on a piece of chicken bacon and I thought I was going to die.
Well, we're glad you
So,
survived.
welcome to my life.
Chicken bacon?
Yes,
That's not a real thing.
it is a real thing.
And,
I'll be the judge of that.
I'll send you some.
And that is Andrea I. Betty Garner, who's over in England.
Hello.
We're glad to have you back, Andrea.
Thank you.
Up in Canada, we've got Phil Jones.
Not in Canada right now. I'm in Florida.
Oh.
Yeah, meeting some old friends.
I saw the thatched boat photograph you sent to us.
Oh,
Is that what they're
the
called?
little
That's
tiki.
very British thing
Yeah.
to... Yeah, tiki boat.
Yeah.
And in New England, the ever enigmatic Pan. How are you, Pan?
Being enigmatic.
Oh,
Hi,
that's good.
Pan.
Well, we've had some fun stuff this week. I think, with the Danny Masterson retrial about to happen, it's been a little bit more of a silly week, which I'm pleased to have because I got lots to do. But one thing that I've been curious about from the first trial was one of the biggest disasters the prosecution had was they tried to put a Scientologist on the stand, which was a bad miscalculation. This guy Sean Fabos ended up just really becoming a problem. And we've been writing about him because he's the son of some very active, wealthy donors, Steve and Peggy Fabos, and they call themselves the Fabos Factor, or Scientology does, because they help with so many different fundraisers around the country, lots of money, and then they had seemed to vanish. And I think all of us were wondering if the trial and their son being in it had something to do with that. Well, there's a convention coming next week at the Valley Org in San Fernando Valley, LA, and apparently the Fabos Factor is back, and they are headliners, along with two more big Scientology whales, Tom Cummins, wealthy electrical industry guy in Florida, and his business partner, Jim Bridgeforth. So I don't know. For me personally, I thought it was interesting to see the Fabos Factor is still in favor with David Miscavige. Otherwise, they would not be on a flyer like that. And I don't know. Are the rest of you as interested in these whales as I am?
Well, the thing that struck me was that it was a 2-day event. Fundraising events I've seen are usually only like an evening event, 3 hours, or an afternoon or something. I can't imagine anybody going to a 2-day fundraising event. I know they call it a convention, but I mean, you just know it's for fundraising just by looking at the flyer.
The first day is 9 a.m. to 10 p.m.
Yeah,
Very
yeah.
thought,
Man.
oh my God, the idea of being 13 hours stuck with these people hustling and hassling and twisting. And, oh God. I don't think they're going to get as big a turnout as they are presuming.
No,
It-
I think you're right.
They're not exactly the Rolling Stones, are they?
Well,
The way they're built up to be something so special, but anyway, I just think that Scientology seems to revere the kind of Cro-Magnon man type. Like, I was looking at the flyer with much glee, as you know I do when it comes to these flyers. Look how masculine Tom Cummins is on the flyer with his wide manly shoulder pads and a chin you could crack walnuts on, couldn't you? I mean, that is a chin of some solidity, and you just know he kind of dribbles testosterone and wrangles bull elephants in his free time. And look, there's a little coy glimpse of his limited edition clear bracelet. Did you see that? I think that was a deliberate posture. But it's a special one because he is such a special Scientologist from melted down Roman artifacts and the shells of kind of critically endangered sea turtles. But I would sit on a hard seat for 13 hours to catch some of that. Ultimate shill for Scientology. He happily kind of coming and going. He happily hands over millions of his own dosh, and he happily in free time encouraging others to hand over their dosh. I mean, he really is a spectacular at what he does.
I
And
think
whatever happened to Jim Mather? Jim Mather was right in there as well a while back, and in the same industry, same vibe that Cummins is.
He doesn't have the
I,
Fabus factor.
no, it's true.
What were you going to say, Pam?
I was going to say that Cummins is working on a percentage as well. I bet he has an angle.
Is.
They all do. Any
Yep.
any of these guys that go in there, they'll get like an FSM commission, field staff member commission on this stuff. I don't know whether it's 10% or 15%.
Yeah, but I mean, Cummins personally has donated like $30 million or something. I mean, even if he's
Yeah.
getting a percentage on other people, I don't know. Could it possibly equal anything like that? I don't know.
Nowhere
No,
near it.
no.
But then
No.
think about his day job, Tony. His day job is getting a percentage of the money that utilities charge for electricity. I mean, he's just a middleman, right? He doesn't actually offer anything.
Oh, just remembering that one video of him where he was essentially bullying people into was he trying to get him to give money or whatever? It was him sitting in his home office.
Oh, that's right.
He was just like, yeah, it's like.
Wasn't the line he said, Lynette, in that video, didn't he say something like, they're going to get this money anyway?
Yes, that is exactly it. And he's like a really malevolent Lurch from the Addams Family.
With a mighty chin.
That's what well, Lurch had one too. And a flat head, if I recall, a flattish head. Anyway, that's who Cummins reminds me of. And he doesn't so much encourage people to give money, is he tone 40s them into giving money, and he backs that up with his height because he is a tall guy. And it's just he's like the worst of Scientology to me.
Well, let's give him the credit he's due. He did marry a woman with just really great fashion sense.
I mean, yes, correct.
I wonder if Mr. Cohen saw her, what would happen?
The universe would implode.
You know, it might implode. That's a good point.
Well, look, I mean, that is a very good question about Mathers. I mean, this is what happens with these whales, is they kind of come and go. And Jim Mathers was very much on the scene a lot for several years. But you're right, I haven't seen him in anything lately. There is a new Impact magazine out there, and I'm dying to get a copy. If somebody could please get me a copy of the latest, because that's where we'll find out who's donated in the last year. Then, maybe Jim Mathers is there. But the last thing I remember Mathers doing was in 2020. He was basically making fun of people wearing masks in the pandemic. That's the last thing I remember him doing. So, but that is a good question, Phil. What happens to these whales? Why do they drop off? Why do they come back? And it'd be nice if one of them came out and kind of explained that whole process to us someday.
Well, I'm looking at Mathers' Facebook page right now, his public one, and he hasn't posted anything since March 11th, 2022. And it's a video, and it looks like he has a porn stash now. Or did at the time of the video.
Oh, wow.
It's yeah.
Well, COVID might have taken care of him.
Now.
We shouldn't be laughing at that.
I know. Well, I mean, that it is an interesting moment where I feel like they're trying to give the impression, well, with this particular convention, this 2-day, like you said, very unusual. It's 2 days. It's at the Valley. Hey, I'll be in LA. Maybe I might have time to go by and count cars. But anyway, it's 2 days. It's at the Valley, and they are presenting it kind of like, okay, this is the first big in-person convention we've had in 4 years. They're saying that. So
this is Okay,
This
I
is
get
kind of
you.
like,
Yeah.
okay, this is the return. We're back now.
Yeah.
So that'll be really interesting to see what kind of turnout they have.
But
And
they're having this right at the Valley Org, aren't they?
yeah, the Valley Org.
But how big a space is that? They can't
Valley
have that
Org is
many people in
big. The
there.
Valley Org is big. They could have a lot of people in there. My memory is, there was a photographer. There was a very good professional photographer who, on his spare time, was taking some pictures for us outside that org. And that was one thing he pointed out was they have a very big, always empty parking lot. So they have capacity if they wanted to put people
Well,
in there.
I'm thinking about how big their hall is, like, or their auditorium, and how many people they can seat there.
I think it's big. I think we've seen images from inside.
I think we have.
Okay,
Yeah.
maybe.
Didn't they do a
All
big
right.
Star Wars party there one time with Nancy, and it was
Mm.
kind of
Oh, right.
pretty big. So, and then that'll be interesting to see if Nancy shows up. I know she's been on some flyers again recently. So I don't know. It could be an interesting moment for Scientology.
I think they'll be disappointed.
Well, they won't show it.
No.
I mean, if they are disappointed, they won't get let on, right?
Right.
Wonder if they'll send Cummins out to drag people out of their homes.
By
It
their
seems
teeth.
it seems like he'd be suited for that sort of work.
He would.
Well, another, like I said, it was a week of strange stories, and another strange story was that some new things have been happening in the Yanti Michael Green situation. And the reason why I keep an eye on, I know that the lawsuit he's involved in is not specifically related to Scientology, but in the lawsuit, he's being sued because he allegedly raped a woman he had been hired as a private investigator to follow. And he's a retired New York Police Department detective. But in the course of that lawsuit, his phone text got taken down from the cloud, and it revealed that he had been working for the Church of Scientology, specifically stalking Leah Remini and Jennifer Lopez when Leah was in town filming a movie, and also that he had been assigned to investigate me at some point. So for that reason, I've been keeping an eye on this guy because, he's just sort of this classic thug that Scientology hires. And he's really been getting his butt kicked in court because I've said this. I've actually been out to court in Long Island to watch this guy. I have never, and I don't want to say I have all that much court experience, but I've reported from court for some years. I have never seen anybody just get on a witness stand and just lie so obviously, lie after lie after lie, and I was going to say he gets away with it, but he really didn't. He was found guilty of criminal and civil contempt for trying to hide some footage of a video from the court, and now they're trying to garnish his wages. I mean, they're kind of closing in on this guy, and his latest move, as they're trying to really sort of put some hurt on him. His latest move is he wants the court to haul me, Jeffrey Augustine, and Karen De La Carrier in for depositions. And he doesn't like the fact that Jeff and I have written about him. That's basically all he's got against us. But he made this bizarre claim that Karen had come to court and taken a picture of him illegally. And this is so strange because I don't know what picture he's talking about. And also, Karen hasn't been to New York since the 90s. So just some really strange accusations. And my attorney says we have nothing to worry about. But I just thought about, if any of you had any thoughts about what I should be doing to prepare myself to be deposed by Yanti Michael Green.
What's he going to ask you?
Well, he claims that I'm on the payroll for this couple that's suing him, which is completely untrue.
And you're under oath, and you say no.
Yeah, I know.
And then he's got to prove it the opposite, which he can't do, and it's game over. I mean, I thought the thing that really demonstrated his complete ridiculousness was that he attempted to represent his company himself, to be pro se for a company. He didn't even know that you can't do that.
Right.
And he's trying to avoid the 300,000 because of the contempt.
If I were you, Tony, I'd practice keeping a straight face.
Really?
Yeah, and Jeffrey had we were talking about it, and he had a really good point. You know, in that the first story I wrote about this I wrote for Daily Beast about these texts showing that he was following Jennifer Lopez. And one of the things he said to his friend, another PI, when he was kind of filling in his friend, yeah, we're following Leah Remini, Church Scientology wants to keep an eye on her. And his friend kind of asked him why. And Yanti on his phone texted, I guess they want to kill her or something.
Oh, is that where that one came from? I remember you
Yeah.
mentioned that.
And so here's a hired private investigator who's a former cop telling his friend that it's his impression they're watching her for a client who's preparing to kill her. And Jeffrey's point to me, he was like saying, as a former cop, how can he not report that if he actually thinks that? So I thought that was a good point. I mean, the guy's just, I keep thinking that at some point the New York Police Department's got to say something about this guy, but I guess they never will.
Well, Tony, that's
You
what
know,
I
oh,
wanted to say. That you've missed me calling you Pip. I know you have, because I've been away for 2 weeks. I know you've missed me.
I have
Um,
missed.
Two things. The first thing, yes, I'm glad that he's starting to suffer some consequences for his lying, and it's kind of a compulsive thing, isn't it? You know, like compulsive liars, very often their lies are so ridiculous and so easily uncovered, and yet they still do it. But yes, that's great, but where are the consequences for allegedly raping a semi-unconscious woman? I want to know why the DA is not kicking down the door, because it's got to be a home run. I mean, there's so much evidence that he did that. Anyway, I know I keep bringing that up. I just cannot get over how this is just not going any further. I just can't. But the other thing I wanted to say is that because he's so comfortable with lying, don't you think that defense attorneys who had dealings with him during his time at the NYPD would be wanting to check his historic police case files for anomalies and, you know, so-called alternative facts?
That's a great point. That's a great idea. And they should be. Yes.
He's clearly a born liar, right?
Absolutely. That's an excellent point. Everybody who's had a client in jail based on testimony from Yanti Green should be going back to court with that.
Yep.
Wow.
I think so.
Yeah, again, just for those who maybe haven't been following along, we're talking about a former New York Police Department detective who an LAPD expert who viewed the footage said, yes, this man videotaped himself raping a semi-conscious woman. And he's going into court saying that she raped him. And also there are people on the record under sworn testimony who said that he told them, yeah, she didn't know I had sex with her. I mean, they can bring in the video, they can bring in those witnesses. What is the DA waiting for?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Incredible.
It makes me angry.
It did seem, the first thing when it jumped out at me when I heard that you and Karen and Jeff were named in this, that, you know, the first thing that pops in my mind is Scientology, but it doesn't sound like it's connected at all. And also, if Scientology had his ear, they're not going to send him in without an attorney.
Right.
Or
no,
unless,
I don't.
Yeah, unless they thought that nobody would be that dumb to go into court without an attorney, because in their mind, you take a dozen attorneys with you if you go.
Well,
into court.
let me just say that if this judge did an absolutely insane thing and said, okay, here's your subpoenas, go ahead and serve those people, and Yanti Green then got to serve me and Jeffrey and Karen and haul us in for depositions, don't you think that all of a sudden at the courthouse or wherever the depositions are set up, suddenly Yanti Green would have Bert Deichsler representing him, ready to do the questioning?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Scientology would love to get their hand on that.
Oh, yeah.
But
Yeah.
I don't think Judge Richard Liano is going to buy any of that. I mean,
I don't think so either. I don't think
Yeah.
it's too crazy.
He's quite sassy though, isn't he, the judge?
He's funny. He was funny. I didn't like I don't think any of us were real thrilled that he hadn't read anything. It was like, oh, we were kind of hoping for a decision that day. And he's like, well, I haven't read anything. I'll get to it. So we're like, oh, but other than that, I liked him. He was clever. It was fun.
Good. That's good news.
So, like I said, it's been a weird week. The other sort of story that came out of nowhere, and I know readers really, really enjoyed it, is we got another LRH 2.0 update. Don't you guys all love Lafayette Ronald Hubbard 2.0?
Yeah, no question. He's my favorite.
He's your what?
Yeah. So if he gets out of
idiot.
Oh.
favorite idiot. Well, my question is, can we still say unindicted when referring to L. Ron Hubbard?
I love it.
Yeah, this seller on Hubbard has been indicted, and that's the thing I noticed as I was going through his court record recently, was he keeps getting arrested and charged, and the latest was just this last month, yet another felony assault. So something's happening in jail there in Anderson County, Tennessee, and this guy's bond is now up to more than $500,000. But he's telling his followers he's about to get out of jail. I don't know if that's true or not, but that's kind of interesting. So that was the update. He's got new charges. He's got a trial in August, but he's telling his followers he's about to get out of jail, and he's starting a new church, the Church of Parascientology, or COPS, COPS.
Maybe Yanti Michael Green is defending him.
Hey,
Sorry, big stories.
I'm hoping that I love the fact that you've got your hands on those, Tony, the kind of on the blueprint of the new cops cult. And I am the joy that you brought us. It was like birthday, Easter, and Christmas rolled into one. I'm hoping that you're going to get your hands on some more of these nuggets that he's releasing to his followers, and that we're going to see some of the some of his plans for what he has for his followers. There's two followers. I think they're Jim and somebody else. But anyway, so I thought mandatory eyebrow tattoos, of course, prison tattoo between his eyebrows, and faded. That's got to be really faded with too much sun, and just look like a biro mark between the eyebrows. Then compulsory revenge defecation, a sex swing in the canteen, skipping, snuggle time, semi-erotic topiary, counting, and dance practice. What do you think? Semi-erotic topiary.
Well, I love that.
I could just see Justin doing that.
But amazingly, there are people who just do think he's the returned L. Ron Hubbard. And I see in the free zone there are still some people talking about how his processes are really, well, they work really well. This has got to be Ron, I don't know.
They probably work as well as Scientology's processes.
Quite, Phil.
And you have to admit, heroin, fentanyl. I mean, the guy's got almost as much dope as LRH1 used,
He's pickled. I love him. As I say, my favorite idiot, Vic Tipness. Vic, just the tipness. We love him, don't we?
No.
He often messages me and says that, I love him, I miss him, and I try. She does. I know she'd rather I not say that, but we particularly love him and his memes. We love his memes, don't we? They're quite meaningful and touching, and inspirational. So he's probably my favorite idiot.
All
then
right, well,
Justin, then Grant, Cro-Magnon.
Thank you for that
Cardone.
suggestion. I should probably go gather some new Vic Tipness memes for
Hell
our
yes.
our readers that don't
Series
know
of
what I'm
memes.
talking about. These are a couple of motivational speaker type wealthy Scientologists, Grant Cardone and Vic Tipness, and their whole thing is based on kind of how cool and cooler than you they are, and there's something else.
Oh, Vic is like a budget Grant Cardone.
Don't
He's
say that. He gets angry at me sometimes.
But you could just watch Miami Vice for a while if you really miss him that much.
true.
Yeah, he doesn't wear socks.
Yeah,
He's Crockett and Tubbs.
Okay, so here's one sample one. He's pointing at you in the camera and he says, "You need balls to make it as an entrepreneur."
Well, I guess that lets me out.
And then here's the
Honestly,
one.
what an
There's the
idiot.
one where he's sitting on his car, and the message is, "Success is like being pregnant. Everyone says congratulations, but nobody knows or understands how many times you were fucked."
He just sees himself as he's just a desperate man, desperate to attract this sort of testosterone. Like, but he's just such a Grant Cardone.
Yeah, he's
It's slightly pathetic.
kind of an Andrew Tate wannabe too, isn't he?
Oh,
Of
yes,
course.
he is.
Yeah, he's kind of like 1.5x.
How did Andrew how did Andrew Tate escape Scientology? That's the real question, I guess.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, he'd fit right in, wouldn't he?
Well, he's going to have to open a Crimenon now.
Okay, so the next story, I told you, is a week of weird stories. The next thing was out of nowhere, this enterprising commercial real estate journalist, Jack Whithouse, I think was his name. He figured out that a converted church on Sunset Boulevard was bought by a Scientology property front for $13.5 million just very recently. And it's really interesting because it's only about 2.5 blocks from Pac Base, Pacific Area Command. And let me just make a note here. I call it Big Blue. A lot of people call it Big Blue. I heard from a couple of Scientologists who wanted me to know they don't call it Big Blue in Scientology. They call it Pac or Pac Base.
Pac Base,
I
yeah.
understand that. I got it. But for so many of us, particularly those of us who grew up in LA, it's Big Blue. It's the old Cedars of Lebanon Hospital, and then the other buildings around it, like American St. Hill Organization, Advanced Organization of LA, AOLA, and it's on L. Ron Hubbard Road or L. Ron Hubbard Way. And it's between Sunset and Fountain. You know what I'm talking about, the Big Blue complex. And just 2.5 blocks down the street on Sunset, down Sunset, there was this church that had been built in 1925, and it was failing. It was derelict, and in 2014, it was sold for $3.7 million to a developer who turned it into kind of an art place, for creative types to have offices and stuff, and for art shows and things. And it called itself Big Art Church for a little while. I don't think it was still going, but really nice venue. The big issue preservationists had was that this guy took out the stained glass windows, and he really shouldn't have. But other than that, it's a really nice venue. You saw the pictures inside. So what the heck does David Miscavige want with this thing? Just like I said, 2.5 blocks from Big Blue, there's already an ideal org at the Pac Base. So it's not for an ideal org. It has already got Advanced Organization, and then down the street they've already got Scientology Media Productions with the studios for making videos. So what in the heck, Andrea, what in the heck do you think he's doing buying this former church?
It's clear to me. Miscavige plans to use it to give alms to the poor and wash their feet. Once a year, like the Pope does, or I don't know how many times the Pope does it. Go on, Pip.
To me, the interesting thing that they bought a church building was just outside of Toronto. Toronto Scientology took over. They were renting, though. They didn't buy it, but the Chalmers Presbyterian Church, the former Chalmers Presbyterian Church, they set up offices in there for some reason. And basically, they're saying to conduct online services and other programs. And I'm not sure what that means, but it seemed strange that they would rent an empty church building, an actual church building. I went by there one day, and there were about a half a dozen cars side on the parking lot and lights on inside. So it just seemed really strange that they would move into an actual church building away from the org, the Toronto org.
How
Not sure what's
recent
going
is
on.
that, Phil?
That was last August.
Oh, wow. So it's really recent. Maybe they're just trying to give themselves a churchy look, a bit like
Yeah,
what
but maybe not. I don't think so. It seemed almost like a secretive thing that they were doing there. There was
Uh-huh.
nothing showing that it was Scientology outside, no signs. They weren't promoting it. It was sort of like a hidden thing. I don't know. I don't know if it's connected to the one in LA or not, or in any kind of plan, but it just struck me that it was odd that they would be taking over actual church buildings.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I just think it's very strange that I mean, I understand the people are saying, well, it looks like a church, maybe that'll help them out, but I don't know. It seems odd. Pan, what do you think?
They've taken such a hammering in public relations in Los Angeles with the mayoral race and with the Danny Masterson thing. I think it's got to be some kind of front PR effort.
Yeah, I saw somebody else suggest that too. I think that's a really smart idea that this has something to do with the terrible PR they've been dealing with. And remember, in Clearwater, they've got those sort of fake front operations for things like CCHR. I wonder if maybe it's time they're going to do that in LA too.
The Potemkin Village. Here we go again.
Yeah.
Right. It'll be like a foundation for a drug-free world place or something. I don't know. They might already have that in LA. I don't know.
Like another layer of religious cloaking.
Yes.
Hey, look, it's an
Right.
actual church building.
Right. It looks great inside too. Looks like a church, really cool.
Yeah. Yes, it does. Those lovely high ceilings. Does anyone think that they bought it? I don't know. I come about with such crap. So Miss Cabbage can like dress as a medieval knight and gallop in slow-mo down Fountain Avenue on the white Scientology stallion. Remember Fabio? Fabio astride that poor horse on the IAS flyers. But they would need to source a white Shetland pony from Miss Cabbage, and I don't think they come in white.
You took the words out of my mouth. They need a small Shetland pony or a Saint Bernard.
Oh, no. Speaking of which, Mr. 4'13" is going to be turning 63 in just a couple of weeks. We're going to have a special. Well, we'll deal with that then. That's coming up on April 30th, right? Is when he's anyway. Yeah, I don't know what Dave is up to here. Very odd. $13.5 million for this converted church just down the street from Big Blue, and may be a while before we find out what they're going to do with it. But my hats off to Jack who figured out, because it wasn't the easiest thing to figure out, because the entity that had bought this place was called Building Management Services. Now, Mike Rinder knew that was the name of one of the property fronts, but good for Jack for checking into that and figuring out that this was actually Scientology buying it, because nobody might have noticed it until Dave did something with it.
The only organization on earth that feels the need to hide its purchase of an actual church building.
Or other properties in Clearwater, all those properties they bought through parishioners.
Yeah, but they keep screaming about how they're a church, we're a religion, we're a church, we're a religion, we're a church.
Yeah.
They don't want anybody to know they bought a church building. What?
Yeah. Good point.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, speaking of church, your proprietor went to church this week and got some more training with Sonny Pereira, going up the bridge. And this week, Sonny took me through grade 1, and I decided that it was time that the rest of our folks that get free emails got a sense of this series, because I really think Sonny's doing a great job, and I've really learned some things about Scientology and the actual nuts and bolts of what it's like to go through all this. People like Phil know, but those of us that have never been don't. It's really interesting to learn some of the actual questions that you're asked in auditing, and Sunny, her observations about them. So this week we did grade 1. Phil, did you have any specific? You usually have some specific observations about how that went.
Well, the thing is, I never did the grades, so I actually never got grade 1. So I don't have the ability to recognize the source of problems and make them vanish like you do. I skipped it. So I went right into Dianetics and Clear and all that stuff after that. But it was really fascinating to listen to and to hear it from an outside perspective. I've spent plenty of times in the chair getting audited for, many thousands of hours, but to actually see it done, hear it done sort of from an exterior viewpoint, external viewpoint, it was really interesting to listen to. And just to see how kind of ridiculous it really is. But it's almost like it twists your brain into some of those convoluted brain teaser questions. You have to the question gets asked, and then some of them are just so convoluted. You kind of have to go, what did he ask?
Yeah.
But yeah.
I loved what Sunny said at one point, and Mark pointed it out. She said, it's like gaslighting yourself.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
That was
I
far
think
more.
we all did our spin. Yeah. Of course it is, didn't we?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was far more profound than anything that I've ever seen in Scientology.
Yeah.
Well, that's fun for me is that, Sunny's doing her best, and she knows there are other ex-Scientologists out there that are going to pounce on her if she does. I mean, for example, I've seen people say, "Oh, well, Sunny's not using the latest. She's not talking about the latest of a golden age of tech, times 2 or whatever." Whatever. But she's doing her best to try to present this as standardly as possible, as Scientologists say. And then I'm doing my best just to mess with it because I'm just like gobsmacked that, a year and a half into Scientology, tens of thousands of dollars already. And I'm being asked to talk about things that happen on the toilet, which was in grade 0. Yeah. And then, this time, talk about like professions and stuff. I can see.
And looking at your knee, you have to look at your knee and look at the chair.
That's
And
right.
the knee was jealous. But you were getting auditing, but it was Sunny who had the big cognition.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Was that I keep bringing up these. I keep asking her like, is this really what happens? And just do people do this or that? And it's been fun for me that she's kind of reflecting on it in a new way. And Pam, what were you going to say?
Well, I just loved it when you said my knee's jealous.
Yeah. But Tony, I've had the same going on too. Like you said, that Sunny is sort of reflecting on it. I get the same thing going on, from all the auditing I had, and I'm seeing it sort of fresh like this, and realizing some things that I just never would have noticed or realized being in the middle of it and having it actually done.
I mean, just one. Go ahead, Andrew.
What she's really portraying is just the tedium of it all.
The tedium, but also, and
you're
also
being whizzed through it at fast forward speed, aren't you? Whereas in what you've done so far in the real world, that it takes months, if not years, to reach this point where you.
That's right. I mean,
months at least, yeah.
Right. We're just doing it very quickly, and when we'll just go do we'll talk about a question in 10 seconds that would normally take somebody 2 or 3 days. So it's much faster. And the other thing was I'm always so tempted to crack a joke, and what I'm learning is the more you do that, the more it costs you. And that's why Scientologists end up being so humorless, because they can't afford to be silly during these things. It just literally costs them money.
Well, part of that too is that Hubbard said that, jokers and degraders, are, next to suppressive almost, that it's frowned on to be a joker and degrader. And you can joke around, but you have to be very careful about joking around, because you don't want to be labeled as a joker and degrader.
Frivolous.
J&D, no J&D.
what's the other word? Dilettante. You don't want to be labeled a dilettante.
Right, right. Yes. Yeah, you got to be serious. You got to take it seriously. You're moving up the bridge. It's serious business.
Saving the world.
Saving the world.
As a never in, it's one thing to know about what the objectives are. It's another thing to hear them in all their BS glory, so to speak. I mean, it's like, obviously the people who are doing this have reached a point where they won't question. I mean, to me, it's blindingly obvious that the questions are designed both to wear you down and also to convolute your mind, like the weird phrasing in some of them.
Yeah.
And it's if I went into it cold, I mean, if I'd never heard of Scientology and I went into that part of it cold, I would be like, you know what? You're trying to pull something on me. I'm out of here.
Mm-hmm.
But they have to be prepared so carefully and for a long time before they're exposed to this. And hearing it, I can see why, because pretty much anybody who isn't like a career seeker is just going to say, this is crap and I'm out of here.
But you're never going to learn how to connect to a chair like this, Hobbs.
I rely on gravity for that.
A dodgy knee. It's like they're tenderizing beef, isn't it, with a hammer to make it more pliable and soft and receptive. I say to you guys like that each week we listen to sweet, lovely, sunny Torture Tony, and I find that so funny. Tony's sheer anguished despair when that tiny tormentor tells him he's about to do more objective processes. You can hear a full body, ugh.
Right.
Yeah, or when she says there's 20 more pages to go, it just cracks me up. I wanted to make a point so interesting to me, talking about what makes the needle float. It's obviously not our thoughts, reading our thoughts. It has to do with all manner of things like Tony described. I found that so interesting. I wanted to add to that by saying Sunny had mentioned that simply moving the toes is one of the best ways to get the needle to react. And that made me think about when I donate blood, the nurse tells me to do a series of movements, and they're just called applied muscle tension. And they keep your blood pressure up while they're draining my entire life-giving blood from my body. And one of those movements is clenching and releasing my toes, and just repeating that small bead up to the site of the needle in my arm. And I just thought it kind of proves how moving one part of the body causes something to happen elsewhere in the body. Yeah, that's kind of what you were saying, Tony, that it's these tiny movements and sometimes that we're not even aware of.
Yeah, and for a floating needle, I would bet that you get conditioned in auditing to hold perfectly still in order to get that needle to float. So, because if you're not moving and you get perfectly still, no breathing or very low breathing, I look back and I think I used to do that for getting a floating needle.
Interesting.
You mean sort of almost sinking into a meditative?
Yeah, yeah. So you're not moving, because if you don't have any muscle twitches or anything like that, it would not surprise me if that gets conditioned into you as you do auditing, because you want to get that needle to float so that you finish it, so you can move on closer to OT levels, closer to the goal, and not have to spend too much more money.
Yeah.
The Promised Land by Twisting Toes. Oh my God.
Yeah, really. Or untwisting of toes. Yes.
Well, Andrea, if you've enjoyed Sunny torturing me, you're really going to want to listen to the next episode, because Sunny is licking her chops at the prospect of putting me through the Joburg next.
Oh, that's right.
Oh, the agony.
Well, just consider it payback for the Prego Feshbach picture.
Oh boy, I can't wait.
That's a lie, Tony. You can wait. You'll see it's like self-flagellation. You're forced to go through this for the sake of the bunker. We do appreciate it.
Okay. Well, thank you.
You're most welcome.
So switching gears, some years ago, I was contacted by a woman who had left Scientology and was thinking about writing a book about it. And she just wanted a little, advice about the market and so I mean it's just tough because publishers kind of want you to be somebody famous to begin with. It's tough. But anyway, she went ahead, wrote her book, and then she came back and let me know it was ready to go. And she, gave me an excerpt to show everybody. And she's got a great title and a great cover for her book. It's called The Bad Cadet. And it's about her.
Brilliant.
It's about her time growing up in Scientology, in the cadet org, and then being in the Sea Org. And it's really charming. It's more a coming of age story than it is kind of an expose of Scientology abuses. And that's why I'm glad she gave us an excerpt so you get a kind of flavor of it. And I think she really wants to appeal to younger readers who are curious about what it's like to grow up in that organization. So yeah, tell me what you all thought about that excerpt that we put out.
I loved it.
The thing that, oh yeah, it was really good. The thing that struck me too was when she said that she was walking down L. Ron Hubbard Boulevard, was afraid to look at the signs for fear of seeing the OT3 data, and yet not questioning why it didn't harm the protesters. It's that double think that goes on in Scientology. It's so common,
I also thought that it was fascinating. Her name, Spellino means epaulette in Italian. For somebody who's joining the Sea Org, she's got the perfect family name.
Is that right? I learned so much from you. Tony, you said that she wanted to appeal more to a young adult or market. I was having a look, and her book today is currently #1 on Amazon's new releases list in the teen and young adult family category. Isn't that amazing?
That's great. I really handed to her because she had let me read the book, and I was trying to get through it. I've been getting ready for the trial. I wasn't sure how we were going to do this, and then she just sent me that excerpt and said, "Why don't you just put this out?" And I said, "That's perfect. It gives people a flavor for it. You can see that the writing is charming. She's a good writer. She paints a scene very well." And so I handed to her that she kind of she's on the ball about the marketing and everything. So yeah, and I just love that cover. What a great sense it gives about
that
breaking
title
away.
was brilliant. I loved it. Bad Cadet. It was.
I loved Mark's remake of it, where he suggested she should have had David Miscavige on there as well. Which
If I left a teeny tiny outline of it.
There's a much smaller Sea Org somewhere.
She's got a lovely sense of mischief and curiosity and rebellion in her, hasn't she? And can I just ask, do we think that that was missing on the Lisa McPherson sign? Not missing, but she couldn't see. Do we think it was justice for Lisa McPherson? Yeah, I think so. I think it must be, don't you? I know lots of people at the bunker have bought the book tonight, particularly on Kindle, and some are all right. UTR is already several chapters in. I can't wait after this to go and start reading it. But I just really was taken by her.
It was really interesting that she mentioned the signs about Lisa McPherson, and yet none of those Sea Org cadets or a lot of the people there didn't know who she was, who Lisa McPherson was. Right. So it kind of makes you wonder what signs are effective for protesting, because
that was effective. That was effective because now they're stuck with the word Lisa McPherson. Who is she?
Yeah, they start asking, but it may or may not ever come up. They're so protected, and as far as that goes.
Well, I thought it was brilliant.
Sorry, darling, go on.
It was just a different tone to a lot of the Scientology, where Scientology is doom and gloom for anybody in it, especially like the poor kids in the cadet org and stuff like that. But to see that they couldn't squash her humanity.
Right.
And just to see that coming out, and how they seem to have a little bit of trouble knowing how to deal with her. It's just refreshing. That's the word I was looking
About
for.
her. She's a little rebel, or she was a little rebel. She's just delightful. Lynette,
Yep.
I was just going to say, Pip was just talking about, thinking carefully about the wording on placards and signs. What will be the most hard hitting? Do you remember when one of the years we protested the IAS gala in St. Hill in England? And I was trying to get, and my mum had bought me a stencil set of letters, and I was so excited to use it, and I wanted to really use it. And I said, I was coming up with these suggestions for what I would put on my banner. And at one point you said, Andrea, you've got like literally 200 words on there. Do you think they're going to be able to read all those as they walk past and drive past? And I was so disappointed. I put so much effort into it. And I ended up cutting like 96 of the words and leaving just something pithy. But the whole time I was there, I was grumbling under my breath. But yeah, it was sensible advice.
And yet you cursed me for it. Thanks.
I would never do that because you're my best friend.
But Phil, you ask a good question. That is, what kind of sign would be the most effective? I think Pan's right. Just, the Lisa McPherson thing does have some impact, but I wonder if they can't look at Xenu, what is, I know that some of the, like Rick Ross and Steve Hassan talk about one effective thing is to ask a person, was L. Ron Hubbard ever wrong about anything? And just get them thinking about that idea. Was really everything he did correct? I don't know. I don't know how you make a sign of that effectively gets people to think along those lines or not.
I still think the call me sign is one of the strongest I've ever seen.
Yeah,
That was something that R2
very
came up with,
impactful.
and he did a brilliant billboard. I mean, that thing, it did have some effect. I did get messages from a few people, not a lot, but some people that actually said that was a trigger for them getting out. Not a lot. It was a couple of people, but so I guess it had some effect, but still, it was a brilliant line that R2 came up with.
He is definitely a
so
professional.
Proud. He is. He's superb at what he does. Very successful.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Well, that was our crazy week of news here at the bunker. And like I said, we're getting ready for the trial, which will start on Monday. Andrea, did you have some thoughts about the free zone this week?
Yes, Tony, I did. In my meanderings this week through the fever dream that is the free zone, I came across something that taught me that we can all learn something new every day. So I have two quotes for you from the free zone. I wonder if they're from the same free zone. Okay, quote, LRH LRH was the high volume Thetan. My personal opinion was that he was probably controlling two bodies at once, Cecil Rhodes and Mark Twain. The similarities between Twain and Hubbard are rather amazing, end quote. Second quote is, I wouldn't be surprised if Mark Twain and LRH were the same being. Both were prolific writers, both were very well travelled at a young age, both achieved notoriety, end quote. So I'm going to read a quote from each author, and then I'm going to ask our wordsmith, our jongleur, if you will, Pan, if he can work out who said what. And
nice.
I'm excited to see if he gets it right. Okay, quote one. Are you ready for this, Pan? It's going to be quite an ask. Okay, my love. Quote one. It was one of those mornings in early spring when nature seems just stirring to a half consciousness out of a long, exhausting lethargy. The past seems a storm-swept desolation, life a vanity and a burden, and the future but a way to death. So that was quote one. And here's quote two. The last Martian report station on Earth was established in the Pyrenees. It's a challenge, isn't it,
This
Pan?
is
So
a tough one.
what do you think? Tough one.
I think the havingness of the first one is certainly Hubbardian. Christ. But what's amazing about the guy is that he actually thought that he could get his acolytes to get him a Nobel Prize at some stage.
What an absolute chancer. Tony, you, of course, have a special connection with Mark Twain House in Hartford.
Oh yeah. Well,
You.
it was interesting when I remember that quote when it came up, and I don't remember who said it, but I thought to myself, do they really not know? I mean, they must not know Mark Twain's history, because Mark Twain, Sam Clemens, was just brutal when it came to the cults of his era. I mean, he wrote an entire book about Mormonism and how, in his description, the Book of Mormon was chloroform in a print form. And he also went after, what was the other one, Pan? That he
Christian Science.
Christian Science. Yes, Mark Twain had no patience for this kind of nonsense.
He murdered them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it seems to be Mark Twain seems to be kind of I don't know, Scientologists seem to like to associate themselves with him, because I remember Kirstie Alley tweeting out some of his quotes, and I remember one particular tweet she had where she said she thought she and Mark Twain would have gotten along really well.
These people must not understand the man. I mean,
he would have used her as an anchor.
Yeah.
oh gosh. I mean, Mark Twain had no patience for nonsense. None. Ah, incredible. Oh, yeah. So there is a person who works at the Mark Twain house who liked my book and invited me to stop there on my book tour. And my friend Dan Perkins, the cartoonist of who is Tom Tomorrow of This Modern World, at that time lived just around the corner. And so he and I went, and they gave us this incredible tour, the sort of behind the scenes tour. And I got but for me, the most amazing moment was when I got to go to Twain's upstairs study that had his billiard table and his writing desk. And I got to stand there next to that desk where he wrote some of his best books. And I just, what a moment.
Sure.
Yeah. So I have such a huge admiration for that author. And that place is just, if you get a chance, if you're ever in Connecticut, make a point to stop in Hartford and go through that house, because it's really wonderful.
You're going to have to make a pilgrimage to Elizabeth, New Jersey now, to the home of Dianetics.
If they'd let me in, Pan, if they'd let me in. Yeah. Well,
Sometimes it's worth showing up at those places if they don't recognize you. Depends on who's on staff there.
Well, you did get into the New York org, so
briefly, that's true.
I got into Orange County org. Took a little video as I was going in and asked a question. They didn't recognize me.
All right. Well, all eyes are on the Valley org next week for their big convention. I got to mention this at the bunker. I found out that the Austin org that we thought might open up this week, they moved their permit back to May. So if there's a new ideal org opening, it's probably going to be in May. So for now, the Valley org convention is the big deal in the Scientology universe. We'll be keeping an eye on that. And of course, the next week is Danny Masterson trial. And so I hope our group therapy folks all find that interesting. And the next time we'll be talking about that. All right. So
all right.
Another episode of group therapy. Thank you, gang.
Thank you, Tony.
Awesome. Thanks, Tony.